purpose of me being here really is to kind of introduce some of the dynamics that we're currently seeing in the Ottawa marketplace that will have an impact, obviously, on not only the demand for labor, but also some of the challenges that we're going to have in finding the labor that we need to keep pace with the projects that we're seeing. Can you guys see the screen from over there? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so just a little bit about BuildForce Canada. How many of you have heard of us? Oh, that's pretty good, actually. But what we are is we started out as the Construction Sector Council. In 2012, we morphed into BuildForce Canada. We are supported by industry. OCA, through the Canadian Construction Association, is a contributing partner to BuildForce Canada and sits on our board. We work with the entirety of the industry, union, non-union, as well as owners and construction associations, to identify the trends that we are seeing in the marketplace, because you can't really do a supply analysis unless you understand the demand. So we don't build anything into our forecasts unless we have either a positive FID or industry certainty as for what the timelines look like for the construction of the project and what the actual construction component is going to be, trying to strip out the M&E component, because when you hear projects being announced, they always include a huge chunk of that investment is actually for machinery and equipment. We're only focused on the labor component. We want to understand what the labor dynamics are, what the labor availability is going to be, and what the demands for specific trades are going to be throughout the project, so that we can provide the best forecast possible to the industry to help inform your labor market development strategies. So, where are we today? And I throw this up just because I think it's important that all of you understand that much of what you're going to see today was developed before tariffs. So we are hearing anecdotally about projects being delayed, some projects even being rethought. We don't really know yet the full impact of tariffs. We'll probably have a better sense of that in the fall. But we know that there will be impacts on supply chains, and that may, in some cases, turn off some of the projects that we are tracking. In the Ottawa market, this is mostly a government market, so we don't anticipate that we're going to see a lot of significant impacts. Yes, costs may escalate, but we don't anticipate that those projects will get canceled. It is a bit of a unique market, but really across the country, what we're seeing is a lot of the big major projects that we are tracking are institutional and government. A lot of investment in healthcare, hospitals, long-term care facilities, infrastructure, public transit. Where we see a lot more private sector investment has been primarily in the western provinces, Alberta. Not to say that there aren't industrial projects across the country in Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, but a lot of the big projects are primarily in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and those would probably be the ones that would be at greatest risk, and also southwestern Ontario and the auto industry. Difficult to say what the impact of all the trade tariff talks are going to be on potentially Volkswagen and even Honda, even though Honda has yesterday asserted that it is planning on maintaining its operations here in Canada. Does it move forward, though, with that $15 billion investment? What does that look like? We don't know yet. So, with that caveat, a little bit about the Ottawa workforce. So when we factor in Ottawa-Gatineau, it's about 64,000 individuals now, just under 65,000 in the market, of which about 16,000 are roughly on the Gatineau side, and the remaining on the Ottawa side. So it's about a 75-25% split. When we look at industry diversity, women account for about 16% of the overall workforce in the region, and landed immigrants are about 14%, Indigenous only about 4%. Youth And this is an area that we have been tracking because of programs such as the Canadian Apprenticeship Service and the impact that had on recruitment. Youth make up about 12% of the industry. And I know Bruce will tell me we're not allowed to have 16-year-olds on job sites. Unfortunately, this is just the way that StatsCan breaks out this category. It's unfortunate, but 15 to 24-year-olds is the category. So there's no way for us to parse that down further. Core, which is really your 25 to 54-year-olds, that is about 68% of the overall workforce. And this is the key number to pay attention to there, which is about 20% of the current workforce in the region is 55 and older. Those are your baby boomers, but not exclusively. Generation X is just behind it. And so that is a bit of a challenge for the industry. It's replacing 20% of the current workforce over the next 10 years. That is going to create some real challenges. Now, in terms of the breakout, when we look at the industry, it's about 34% of the industry is working in the residential sector, about 6% non-res buildings. Heavy civil is about 5%. And specialty trades, about 55%. Again, no surprise. Foundations, about 25% in terms of the specialty trades. The mechanicals make up just under 50% of the overall specialty trades sector. And finishing trades, about 19%, and then there's the other trades. So that is essentially the workforce that we see in the region. When we look at Ottawa and provincial demographics, and this is just give you a general sense of where we're at. You look at the Ottawa-Gatineau, I don't know why that says what it does, but when you look at Ottawa-Gatineau, about 17% of the population is under the age of 15. And the key one here is that, again, 50 to 64. 20% of the population. So it doesn't take a mathematician to figure out. Over the next 15 years, we are expecting to see more people moving into retirement than available to replace them. The trend in Ontario is slightly worse in that we have fewer young people available to enter the workforce over the next 15 years than individuals leaving the workforce. Now, when we look at the overall industry outlook, just focusing on housing, we've been seeing a bit of a shift. And again, this isn't surprising. It's really been driven by affordability. A lot more multis and apartment types, so apartment condos, being built than singles. The number of single detached homes has actually been going down as an overall share of the total housing starts. We've actually seen them decline from about 30% of the mix down to about 20%. What we have seen is a significant increase in multis, and in particular, high-rise multis. They now make up 62% of all housing starts in the region, up from 52% in 2018. And that's a significant jump. And that trend in particular, when we started to see the federal government introduce the GST rebate in September of 2023. So for purpose-built rentals now, you can get 100% rebate of the GST. We did see a bit of a spike, not enough of a spike, frankly, to overcome the challenges that we're still seeing in the marketplace related to higher interest rates and the impact that has had on borrowing costs and, frankly, consumer demand for housing. So the overall trend that we have been seeing has been one of decline, and again, ever since we peaked in 2021. Now, moving forward, the black line here is household formations, and formations are really driven by young people coming together to form essentially households. And the big driver for the last little while has been immigration, foreign students and immigrants coming into the country, in addition to young people moving into their 30s and starting to create families. Household formations, as a result of the reduction that we've seen in immigration levels, are projected to continue to go down over the next 10 years. They're basically right till about 2027 and then flatlining with a little bit of a bubble in between. So the impact, as we see on housing starts, are we will see housing starts increasing to try and close that gap and then remaining relatively flat throughout the rest of the forecast period. Peak construction for multis is expected in around 2029. And if you look at overall investment trends, overall investment continues to rise. New housing in particular, the demand for new housing is going to remain strong. But renovations, which is the mid-green color there, also continues to increase. And that's not surprising given that Ottawa is increasingly a more mature market. Municipal policies are certainly encouraging densification. And many individuals, as they get older, rather than moving into a new house, decide to invest in upgrading their existing home. And particularly those individuals that are getting older, they need to make modifications so that they can age in place in their homes. So the demand for renovations is going to continue to increase. Maintenance remains relatively steady, and that's, your typical, got to replace the roof, something wrong with the chimney that needs to be fixed. That, again, remains relatively steady throughout. We do anticipate that we're going to see a bit of a bounce back in singles. And again, the preference for most individuals, particularly as they start to raise families, is not to do it in an apartment. They want to do it in a house. And so we think that that's going to, particularly as interest rates continue to decline, and we anticipate we're heading into a period of relative stability, unless Donald Trump does something new, but relative stability in terms of interest rates. And that is going to bring more people, particularly, again, we have a large cohort of individuals now moving into their prime family raising years, and they're going to be looking to move out of their condos downtown and move into a home where they can actually raise their family. In terms of demand for occupations, we track 34 trades and occupations. And on the residential side, as you can see, the red bars basically imply that we're going to be in surplus, that we actually may have more individuals available in that given year than required based on demand. And we did see that in 2024. And again, we've been seeing a decline primarily in new construction and new housing construction. We anticipate a bit of a rebound next year, and that is going to basically carry right throughout the forecast, where we're anticipating we're going to be short individuals in the residential sector. Over the 10-year period, demand or the labor force will need to grow from about just under 21,000 to just over 25,000 individuals. So the demand growth is about 4,500. Retirements, we anticipate, are going to be just slightly above 5,000. That means that the residential sector alone in Ottawa is going to need to hire 9,700 individuals. That's just to keep pace with demands. Now, based on historical levels of recruitment, that's the best estimate that we can come up with. We're anticipating we're going to pull in about 4,400 individuals locally. That will leave us with a gap of about 5,200 that will need to be found from outside current recruitment patterns, or through heightened, more aggressive recruitment locally, or pulling in individuals from other industries or from other regions. Whether that's possible, hard to say right now, because the 5 regions in Ontario are all operating under very similar conditions, with the exception right now of the Greater Toronto Area, where we are seeing significant declines in housing starts, in part because there is a slight oversupply right now of condominiums in the Greater Toronto Area, and not a lot of expectation that 2025 or 2026 may be any better. So it may take some time to get through that inventory, before we start seeing new construction picking up again in Toronto. So there is some softening in the Greater Toronto area, and that may be a potential market from which Ottawa contractors may wish to recruit. Now, moving into the non-residential side, again, this gets back to this is where a lot of the activity is. And as you can see, most of this is government driven. LRTs, we anticipate by 2026 will be more or less done. And then there's the Alexandra Bridge. There is some engineering component to the Alexandra Bridge replacement. But a lot of the big activity is happening on the institutional side. And I've just listed some of these projects, but as you can see, there's a lot of overlap. And there's a stacking that happens right here, which is going to create some significant pressures for the industry. Again, looking at the engineering investment, roads, highways, and bridges, this is where a lot of the activity is going to be. This is where we're seeing the greatest amount of investment. Alexandra Bridge is really starting about here and moving out. But there's still, in 2025, 2026, there's the end of the project, the 417 rehabilitation. We anticipate most of that will be done this year. The city has put out about $340 million worth of projects for 2025. A lot of them are sewer, but also water and road replacement eventually. And again, there's the start of the 417 Arn Prior to Renfrew widening, and that is all going to create quite a bit of demand on the roads, highways, and bridges. End of the LRT is going to bring down the other engineering component of investment, and again, that's no surprise. But we do see a bit of a rebound, in part because this sector picks up a lot of activity from various other sectors. Heavy industrial, not a lot of heavy industrial activity going on in Ottawa. But if you look at government investments, so institutional and government buildings, that's where the bulk of the activity is going to be. And again, lots of declines here. We only know what we know today. This is based on projects that the industry has identified for us now. We have no idea what might come forward in 2028, 2029 that could have an impact on the tail end of this forecast. And there is a lot of activity still in the region. The region's population continues to grow. It is a popular region, and we anticipate certainly the commercial, a lot of the activity you're seeing here on the commercial side and on the institutional side is driven by population growth, as well as federal rehabilitation of a lot of its major assets in the downtown core. But Ottawa is poised to continue to grow, and we anticipate that's going to continue to create stresses locally. But the big driver, as you can see, remains institutional investment. And again, this also government investment. So the region is a little bit protected from tariffs in that the potential impact on private sector investments, there aren't a lot of big private sector investments that we're tracking. So we anticipate a fairly stable market over the next 10 years that really shouldn't be impacted too dramatically by tariffs. Doesn't mean that your supply chains won't be. And then looking at essentially the impact on labor, shortages pretty much right through to about 2028, at which point then some of the big major projects start to release workers, and we could be seeing surpluses of workers right through to 2032. That being said, over the 10-year outlook, we anticipate we're going to need to add about just under 2,000 individuals. And again, industry is slightly younger. The non-res side of the workforce is slightly younger than the residential workforce. Fewer retirements happening. Still need to hire just under 6,000 individuals locally. Now, for the most part, we should be able to find them. So we don't anticipate we're going to be short a lot of workers. And in part, it's because we're seeing a bit of a softening happening in the middle years of the forecast, but also because the industry, the non-res side, does do a very good job of recruiting young people, in part because they bring a lot of young people through the apprenticeship system into the workforce. So looking out, and again, this is just res and non-res together, we do anticipate we're going to see a bit of softening by 2030 in terms of the workforce. We may actually be slightly oversupplied. The big peak is going to come in 2026, where we're really going to find ourselves short individuals. So for this year and next, if you're anticipating labor conditions were going to improve, they're probably not. You're not going to feel it. You're still going to be struggling to find the workforce that you need to keep pace with construction demands, which do remain high in the region. And with that, I could read this through, but I think most of you at this point are tired of listening to me. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce and let him share his presentation. Happy to take questions at the end of this. So if you could hold off until after Bruce is done, both of us will be more than happy to take questions. No, I'm going to do it for you.
Hello? Hello? Oh, there we go.
I got to shut mine off.
Good morning, everybody. Bill provided all that information about the industry and the needs and everything. And for those of you that have been to the AGM the last couple of years and heard the beginning of the presentation about what we're doing in the education group in terms of recruiting, this is a little bit of a brief overview of it, and then we'll talk about what we're trying to accomplish here. And some of the beginning, which button is it? Just the, some of the beginning of these slides here are some overlap with Bill in terms of statistics and stuff. And we've been into a number of high schools in the Ottawa area presenting this, and we give a really quick overview of a lot of the data that Bill provided just to give the kids an idea of what our industry is all about. And the way I like to talk about our industry is it's a great place to work. And I think we as a group, a collective in the city, have to focus on telling young people what a great place it is to work. You know, my kids always used to say that, you know, we'd drive around and I'd stop at every construction site and point at things, but I could point at things I was involved in. We were involved in that building, we did this. And we can all do that and be proud of the things we're doing. So I just quickly, this stuff, Bill presented the stats on the industry. Obviously, everybody's well aware of the large projects that are coming down in the Ottawa area. And one thing I'm going to talk about again at the industry panel after this is we want to focus today on the positive. The world's full of bumps. Our neighbors to the south are doing some interesting things these days, but we live in an amazing city with an amazing industry and a lot of wonderful people, and we should be very happy about all the opportunities we have. And let's be positive today and focus on moving forward, because there's just too much talk in the media about all the negativity. So again, that's the message that I wanted the OCA to deliver today, was let's be positive about this. Look at all the amazing things that are going on. And as part of that, our effort here at the OCA, and just to recap the story briefly, about 5 years ago, I took over the reins of the education committee at the OCA and had this idea that we would develop a tool that we could use to get to young people, and not just young people, but people moving to our city, people coming to our country, and say, look at our industry, look at what a great place it is to work in. You know, and how do you know that unless you have an opportunity to what I call taste test? So, you know, like people, you know, you ask a young person about a job, any one of your jobs, ask them if they know anything about the job you do. And how would they find that out? Well, maybe they sit down with you and you can answer some questions for them. And when I talk to high school kids, you know, you'd be surprised at some of the simple things they want to know. You know, one of the questions I always ask at a high school class is, like, where do you use the washroom on a construction site? And you know what the number one answer is, obviously, right? The porta potty on the 20th floor when it's minus 30. No, it's not. We have heated washrooms, you know, we have all those good things. We have female-only washrooms that are cleaned multiple times a day. OSHA's now put in a rule effective on sometime this year where we have to put those logs up to say when we clean them and everything. Okay, this is not 20 years ago's washrooms. Well, that might be important to a young person to decide, do I want to work in the construction industry, right? So it's just simple things like that that we answer for the young people. But The website that we created is called OCA Careers. Most of you who've been around OCA presentations are familiar with it. But the idea was to give young people a place to go to look at our industry. And Julia DeVries, John's daughter, who actually just left for Australia on Monday night, spearheaded this program for me for about 18 months. And we got it over the goal line at the AGM last year, and now it's a certain part of it's matured, and we have a significant number of these videos up, but these are just a little bit of statistics. I'm going to walk through the site quickly. But we're now getting into the high schools regularly. I'm there about twice a month right now, talking to the kids, showing them the website, playing a video for them, answering questions for them, and encouraging them to look at our industry. We have over 200 videos, and these videos are interviews with people. And here's my sales pitch. Anybody in this room that would like to be interviewed, just let me know, because we'd be happy to add your story to our site. We have 30 plus French language videos now. The site's translatable, and I'm more than happy to keep adding. But I'll just walk you through quickly for those that aren't really familiar with it, and we can talk a little bit about it. The initiative started, and again, part of the motivation for the initiative was my personal experience of bringing young people to construction sites and showing them what we do. You know, and just a really quick story, 4 years ago, young lad, his mother worked with my wife. He was in grade 12, was feeling lost, didn't know what he wanted to do. You know, it's pretty stressful in grade 12, and, right, young people, right? It's pretty stressful when you don't know what you want to do. I can tell you most young people don't know what they want to do. She's pointing at a young lad right there. Happy to talk afterwards. They don't know what they want to do, so we want to just show them what we're doing. I took the young lad for a walk at one of our construction sites. We walked around, and I said, "What'd you think?" And he goes, "Really interested in the electrician." I don't know how come the electricians get all the attention, but anyway. So Sega Electric was gracious enough to take the young lad for another walk with their foreman, and today he's a third-year apprentice. Everyone's happy, great job, great career, loves what he's doing. You know, one little opportunity was a taste test, right? So the motivation behind the site is that story, and I've got many others like that over the years, where at least we've been able to show somebody something. My own son, who works as an estimator with RECL, went through a similar process in high school and college where he wasn't sure. Fortunately enough, I kept showing him different jobs, and he got a chance to try a lot of things, and then he found something he liked. Decided he wanted to be an estimator. It's kind of like being a goalie, eh? They're all a little bit left to center. But he loves what he's doing, and it's great. So the site itself, if you go on it, under the Careers tab, there are 200 plus videos. They're 4, 5, 6, 8 minutes long. And they're really amazing stories. Young people, old people, all kinds of different diverse places people are coming from. And, you know, Bill talked about his statistics, which skilled trades and workers on a site, this is everything. This is city plans examiners. This is architects and engineers. This is estimators and project managers and surveyors and everybody else that works in our industry, accountants, because there's lots of people that work in our industry, right? So we focused on everything. There's a lot of focus on skilled trades, which is wonderful. We focused on everything. So, you know, that young lady, the building inspector, is a really interesting story. And one of the common themes in the interviews, very few people got where they are going one way. They went this way, and then they tried it, and then they went this way, and then they went this way. So I always tell young people, try something. And don't think like the decision you made in grade 12 or in college is the decision for the rest of your life. If you don't try, you don't know. And a lot of these stories are about multiple tries before they landed on what they were really interested in. So really good videos. These are some pictures of Julia's adventures in terms of doing this. The other thing I'm really proud about with this website is it was homemade. We did the interviews ourselves. We produced them using Algonquin students. We didn't use any professional firms, no offense to the professional firms, but we did it a lot less expensive. And the videos, I think, look very professional and great. So, and the site was developed by an Algonquin student. Each of the videos, when you click on them, there's the interview itself, there's a story about the job, important for young people, what the salary range is, what kind of education you need. Are you working indoors, are you working outdoors? and what category it falls into. So some basic information to help people make decisions. It's really good stories. This young lady who works at Tomlinson did all kinds of other things and ended up in that career when she was in her late 30s. And a lot of them are very passionate, most of them are very passionate about what they're doing. If some who are at the AGM 2023 remember the young lad from Tomlinson who we played his video. He was a laborer on site, and I see the Tomlinson guys nodding their head. He was a great video and very positive, and Graziella told me last night he's now been elevated into a health and safety position. So, you know, he told a story about why he was there, and now he's moving along with his career, which is great. Other video examples, and again, all kinds of different things. The young lady in the middle is a mason. I've played that at high schools a few times. She's an amazing story in her late 20s, who's on her way to being a part owner of that firm. The only thing is she talked about her workday starting at 4 a.m. and ending at 11 p.m., which wasn't helping me sell the industry to young people. So I had to say, well, she's an outlier, but look, at her age, she owns a house and a car, and she's going to own a business and all this stuff, and she absolutely loves what she's doing, but her workday isn't, you know, don't look at that as everybody in our industry does that. But again, really, really good story. The second piece of our program is called Connect, and this form is on the website, which allows any person to reach out to the OCA and say, hey, I watched a video on whatever, that young lady is a mason, and I'd like to meet a masonry contractor. I'd like to go to a job site and walk around and ask them questions about their job. And we will connect them to an OCA member firm who does that kind of thing, and hopefully help them get that experience that young people that I've had the experience with, walking around and saying, hey, like, that's an interesting job, I'd like to do that. Now I've had a chance to talk, how do I get into that? What education do I need? And so the Connect program is a bit in its infancy. It's the first year, first 12 months. I think the statistics were we've connected about 30 people. It's an ongoing thing. Katrina Timoner's taken over at the OCA for Julia when she left, and she's focused on making sure this continues. So this is a piece that we're promoting. The other parts of the site, if you look at the tabs at the top, we have connections to all the co-op programs in the city at the high schools, college, and university levels. There's a really good video on there of this gentleman from PCL who went through the high school co-op program, and then he went through it during university, and then he ended up, or college, and then he ended up at PCL, and now he's a senior site superintendent there. Great story for kids to see the impact of co-op and where they could end up. Just pop that out. The next one is resources, and we've put some connections there to various programs. There's lots of great skilled trade stuff out there. Interesting, the Honor the Work program at the top is focused on grade 2 to grade 8 kids. A lady named Angela Caldwell in the GTA put this program together, and she's got kits that she takes into the school so they can teach the kids about the trades, you know, books and all kinds of interesting things to get them interested in it. You know, I guess everybody's probably seen this slide, which talks about the paths. I'm really happy to report that the guidance counselors have shifted their mindset a little bit away from you must go to university. Now they're promoting high school, they're promoting apprenticeships and college programs. We have wonderful colleges in the city with great programs. My personal experience with that is I have a daughter who was a mechanical engineer and certainly was a university type kid. My 2 sons went to college and just couldn't wait to get out. It was a means to an end. Get out of there as fast as they can and work. Colleges, those things are not for everybody. The apprenticeship programs are great, and you can see the math on the what you end up spending on education and what you end up getting at the end, whether you have debt, whether you don't. It's not for everybody. And going to university, obviously, and spending a lot of money and ending up not where you want to be is maybe not the right path. And the high schools are doing a lot better job now focusing on all 3 streams and making sure people are aware of it. Again, statistics out there, we all know the stories about how much our skilled trades make. They make quite a bit of money quickly, very little debt getting there and support doing it, so they are great opportunities. So that's a quick thing through what I do at the high schools and what we do at the high schools. But I'm here to say that we need everybody's help in this room to promote our industry and make sure young people know what the opportunities are. And the next step for our program is to create I'm hoping aspirationally to create a citywide high school coordinated high school co-op program. So if everybody's familiar with co-op in this city and any other city, let's call it beg, borrow, and steal. You know, the shop teacher makes some calls. You know, the person teaching masonry makes some calls. They know somebody who owns a company. Could you hire this? And that's sort of the way they cobble together the jobs. There isn't really a coordinated effort. And my thoughts are that if we can focus on creating a standard co-op program that, say, outlines what does it mean to hire a co-op student. You know, I could ask everybody in the room, do you understand what it means to hire a high school student, how much you pay them, how long they work for, what training they need? And we can figure out with the schools exactly what those requirements are and make sure our members know what those requirements are and say, okay, ask the members, and we have almost 1,200 OCA members, how many jobs out there could you offer up this summer to high school kids? And we could help coordinate it between, say, the 4 big school boards, the 2 French and 2 English ones in the city for starters. And I don't know how many jobs we could get, maybe 500 jobs across, maybe 1,000 jobs. But if we could help the schools coordinate this, you'll talk to a lot of people who have had a lot of success hiring high school co-op students who eventually work their way into the system and become skilled trades or become other things. We're a construction manager. You know, I envision, you know, our firm participating in a program like this where every summer we would hire maybe 1 or 2 high school kids. One would be out in the field somewhere, and one might be in our office working with our estimators and project managers, and at least taste test the opportunity to work in these jobs, and you never know will influence these kids in the path they go on. So sometime this year, I'm going to sit down. I've got meetings planned with the school boards to sit down and explore the idea of this coordinated co-op program. And that will be the next step for the OCA. And I envision this being a full-time job at the OCA. It was while Julia was here. We're just recalibrating with her leaving. But that's the vision. And I think the program can be a big part of what the OCA is doing in terms of encouraging. But I ask everybody in the room, you know, young lad at the back there who's not sure what he wants to do, come and talk to us. Talk to young people, promote our industry, show them what a great place it is to work. Like I said, I'm focused on the positive. You didn't mention Ted Lasso, but I'll channel my inner Ted Lasso here. You know, let's be positive about it. We're really fortunate with all the stuff we got going on, really proud of all the things we're doing. And at the end of the day, we just want these young people to at least make an educated decision that, hey, I saw the job, it's interesting, I like it. And think about all the jobs in our industry that nobody knows about. Like, how many people know a kid that went to college to be a caulking contractor or went to, you know, I'm just picking on that one in particular, but there's all kinds of jobs that the trades need. But how do people end up in those jobs? Usually they end up doing something else and then they learn about it. You know, I mean, how many in high school say, I want to be an elevator contractor? Boy, we need elevator workers, you know. So anyway, that's the gist of it, and we were trying to put what Bill talked about together with what we're doing here at the OCA, which is you can see the demand, you can see the need, and what are we doing about it? What are we doing to try to promote and bring young people into the industry? So connect the dots there. I don't know how we're doing for time. I'm not paying attention. What's your watch say? Okay, so on that, I think we're happy to open the floor up to any questions or comments from the group. They're aware of it. Everybody's aware of it. I think when we get to this co-op thing, I think we want to try to loop in everybody. I want to get the template done first, and I think one of the things is, again, I mean, how many in this room know exactly what's involved with hiring a co-op students? Those that have do. You know, I can honestly say I don't really know all the details, you know, and once you know them, I mean, is that a commitment for us to spend, pick a number, $8,000 for 2 months to have a young person, say, in my office working with my estimators all summer, and at the end of it might say, hey, that might be something I'm interested in, and is it an investment as companies we could make on an annual basis? And I mean, most OCA companies at least consider it. So yes, we definitely want to loop those associations in. Other questions? So Chris Hahn at Algonquin participated in the entire process. He's retired. Yeah, he's not gone. He's just retired, right? But good to hear. There's an interesting point. I was doing a panel at one of the OCA did a panel for high school guidance counselors 2 years ago, and there was a gentleman from the Masonry Association, and someone asked him what the most important criteria they were looking for in young people, and he said showing up on time. And I thought, we have to do something about the bar. Okay, like seriously, breathing in the morning and getting up is not a criteria for a job, but it's an interesting point to say, how do we educate young people? And I think that would be part of the reciprocal side of co-op, would be to go to the high schools and say, here are the criteria. This is how you go to the interviews, this is how you handle, this is what's expected. Some kind of a minimum that's beyond breathing. I mean, you're all laughing about it, but he literally said showing up on time was number one, and I thought, oh my God. Anyway, other questions?
Is there a template, high school template across North America that you researched or looked at that makes sense?
There might be, I don't know, and we're just starting. I actually yesterday was emailing with some people at the OCDSB to set up a meeting with them to start talking about it. And my questions are going to be, what have you guys got? How do you do this? What do you tell employers? Do we have a template? Right? And I'll be going out to our members too, and what kind of template, what information do you guys want if you're going to consider, what do you want to see? So yes, we have to develop it. I'm sure somewhere out there someone's doing this. In my travels across North America the last 24 months, I've talked to quite a few people, US and Canada, about the program, and there's various programs going on around. Some are similar. There was one in Colorado that I saw last fall at the Procore conference, which they were doing something similar to this. We patterned our video program after a site in BC that was focused on all sectors. And I really liked the way they did the videos, and that's where the idea of doing these videos and providing information came from. So more than likely, it's rare. I always say in the construction industry, there's very few unique problems. Somebody solved this problem somewhere. So look around and try to find it, because there's very few that have never been solved somewhere. So we'll be looking for that.
Question for Bill. On the federal campaign, we've heard about 3 million housing units required in the next few years. Didn't see that forecast up there. How real is that, do you think?
The reason you didn't see it there is we don't put in aspirational targets, and we just released our forecast, and I had a phone call from the government of British Columbia that says, your housing starts are pointing in the wrong direction. I said, yeah, they are. The reality is that we've had monetary policy and fiscal policy basically colliding for the last little while. Interest rates have been incredibly high, and that was to try and fight inflation, while at the same time you have federal governments trying to incentivize construction of new homes. What we have been seeing is that there's a little bit of easing of pressure on rental rates or rental vacancy rates across the country, in part because we've been seeing a lot more purpose-built construction taking place, purpose-built rental construction taking place. That is starting to ease some of the pressure. As well, we've had changes to immigration policy, fewer foreign students, declines in temporary foreign workers. We'll see what happens over the course of the summer, but that is starting to make housing units or rental units available again. So we've been seeing a decline. We're also starting to see a decline in housing prices across the country, and in part, all of that is starting to ease some of the pressure that had really built over coming out of the pandemic, when, frankly, there's a shortage of labor across the country. And as much as everyone wants to blame the federal government sometimes, they responded to what they were hearing from, frankly, Canadians, that there weren't enough people in the workforce. And that was true, because we saw unemployment rates decline to levels we hadn't seen since 1976. In construction alone, we reached an all-time low in July of 2022, I believe it was, where we had an unemployment rate that was just below 3%. That's full employment in construction. Anytime we get below 5%, we're already into full employment. And we need not to sound like an economist, but we need a degree of frictional unemployment, which is really releasing workers in a timely manner so that they become available to work on other projects. What we were seeing from contractors across the country is they were hoarding workers. They didn't want to release them because they didn't think they'd get them back. And that was the same mentality we saw in 1976 and throughout the 70s when we had gas shortages. People were filling up their cars even though they didn't need to. And that created a drain on, frankly, the supply of gasoline, which led to price increases. Same mentality was happening here and across not just construction, but all industries. So the federal government basically increased immigration, and that led to an easing of the labor force pressures, but at the same time created housing pressures. So we're now getting to a point where we're starting to see that get rebalanced. Looking forward, again, 3.5 million, we looked at that target. That workforce that I was showing you on the residential side would need to double. It's not realistic, and we're not seeing market conditions that are demanding that much additional housing. And as I say to a lot of people when they ask me, and I've got to be careful about my opinions, and hopefully, you know, I guess this is going on YouTube, so I'll be very guarded about this, but the only way you increase housing affordability is if existing homes come down in price. And I'm not sure most homeowners want to see that. So you can increase the supply, but that's going to have a corresponding impact on the value of existing homes. And so it's a real difficult problem to fix. We do know that we have a supply shortage right now. There aren't enough houses out there, and we do need to increase those homes, or the number of homes out there. But that will have an impact on existing home prices. And so it's a difficult balancing act that governments are trying to delicately walk right now. But we don't put in aspirational targets, because had we would have been sending a signal to the industry that we need to hire another 100,000 individuals. And market conditions don't demand right now that we need another 100,000 individuals. So those people will be coming into the industry and being unemployed. And that is more dangerous to this industry than shortages. Because if we go out and encourage a lot of young people to consider careers in construction, they come in and they can't find work, or they come in for a short period of time and then are unemployed, they go back, they talk to their friends. And so all the efforts that we've put in, all the work that Bruce has been doing and all of you have been doing to try and recruit young people into this industry, they go and talk to their friends, and their friends talk to their friends, and next thing you know, we can't recruit anybody into this industry. So we've got to be very careful, and that's why our numbers, we only put things in where we know how much investment is going in, what the timelines are for construction, and frankly, try and strip out the mechanical and electrical, or the machinery and equipment components, so that we're not overinflating the demand for construction labor. I don't know if that specifically answered your question. I hope it did.
I've been lucky enough to listen to Bill talk quite a bit. I consider myself almost a groupie the number of times I've seen him talk, and I may be quoting you right now.
I'm your groupie.
Yeah. But perspective on that was, in a 10-year window of housing building in this country, and I may be quoting you, you can correct me, but we were running an average of 225,000 doors over that 10-year window, and in the peak we hit 270.
Yeah.
So our politicians came out and make a proclamation that we're going to build 500,000. And at the peak, if we remember what the peak looked like in this city and other parts, when we were struggling to build doors, and I'm talking doors, high-rise, low-rise, they want to double what we did at the peak. And as Bill said, first off, we have nowhere near the people to do it, and we may not even have the demand for that. So when you hear the politicians make a proclamation of that, it's totally unrealistic. It's not even connected to reality, because we don't have the infrastructure to do it.
Yeah. So. And that's the other key, is that people tend to focus just on the house. But as the former CEO of the Canadian Construction Association once said, we're not building cabins. You need underlying infrastructure in place first and foremost before you can start construction. And so it's not just a simple exercise of approving permits to put up a high-rise. You can't, and see this in a lot of major urban centers right now where you've got tremendous congestion, traffic congestion, because there wasn't enough foresight into what will the impact of this building be on the traffic flow. First off, the infrastructure needs to be upgraded. So usually you end up with a lot of detours around major arteries because that's where they're putting up these high rises. So that creates frustration. And then the next thing is, okay, well, now we start putting up the building. So 5 years later, once the building is up and connected to the infrastructure, everybody's complaining about that. I can't drive down that road anymore because there are too many people using it. Well, again, not enough foresight going into the infrastructure that is required to support densification. And particularly, and again, this isn't a position on bike lanes, but when you start reducing the actual amount of roadway available for increased traffic, well, it doesn't take a genius to figure out you're going to have some problems. And that's the situation we find ourselves in a lot of major urban areas right now, where we're dealing with more mature cities that there isn't really the capacity to expand the roadway infrastructure the way there would be when you're doing greenfield development outside the periphery or in the periphery of, or at the periphery of these cities.
Any other questions?
For the rate stacking, like within the next few years, and also we saw the graph of all the people retiring and stuff. Are there like solutions or like increased like measures to increase productivity or efficiency on site that are kind of like developing or starting up that would help with like easing that pressure of either keeping the workers there a bit longer, who want to stay longer, by like having easier work, better tools? Or?
So, interesting question. As most of you know, we're in the middle of union negotiations at the provincial level because the agreements all expire at the end of the month. And we had a presentation in the EBA yesterday because I'm involved with the association here in Ottawa on absenteeism. And the statistic was that absenteeism across all industries, the optimum average is about 1.5% or 3 days a year, and this is sick, no reasons or whatever, not vacations and not planned stuff. And the construction industry that they polled is running at 8 days a year. So we're looking at 2.5 times the absenteeism of what would be considered a reasonable level. So this is a good question, is how do we address absenteeism in our industry, because it's affecting efficiency. People that don't show up unannounced, don't show up, it affects your crews and how they work. You can't just snap your fingers, as I always say. We don't put our superintendents in the freezer and thaw them out in the morning when I need them. These are people, right? So we have a big problem there, and efficiency is a really good point. We're trying to address it with the unions. That presentation is actually going to be given to the unions this week prior to money negotiations next week to say, hey guys, like among everything else here, driving wages up beyond sustainable levels to stay competitive, this is another huge problem, is productivity. Now, I mean, one thing I always say when I speak at the universities quite a bit, and there's this, I say to the kids, like, you all hear the thing that millennials or generation alphabet soup, whatever it is, X, Y, Z, I've lost track, are lazy and entitled, right? And they all go, yeah, everybody calls us lazy and entitled. And I go, well, I know a bunch of lazy, entitled baby boomers too. It's across all generations, and I've got an amazing group at our organization of young people that are productive, efficient, work hard, do all the right things. So you young people, there's lots of you great ones out there, okay? It's not just, us old people looking down at you lazy, entitled people, right? But how do we fix this issue of the bar is, I get to work on time. The bar is, I'm breathing this morning and I stood up. Okay, we've got to start doing something about it. Your point is very well taken, is that we've got to deal with this, and absenteeism is a big issue right now, among others.
I was just going to say, and don't expect the situation to get better, because...
Oh, come on, Ted. You got to be more optimistic than that.
Well, the positive side is that we still are seeing tremendous interest in construction trades, but it's not a one-to-one replacement. Those retiring workers take with them years of experience. And so expecting a young person coming in to replace that older worker that's leaving to have the same skill sets and abilities to be as productive as the individual that has just left, That's not realistic. It usually takes 5 to 10 years before they get the skill set, have the skills to replace the older worker that's leaving. So it's important to remember that there will be implications here, and that's why this is not the time to take your foot off the gas. We need to continue to bring in young people to backfill, and we've got to get more creative about how we try and keep those older workers in a mentorship capacity, because mentoring is going to be so important, particularly in the skilled trades. Just because somebody is really good at what they do doesn't mean they're a good teacher. And we need to make sure that we don't lose those individuals that have the skill sets and have the ability to communicate that and work with young people, because if we're not transferring that knowledge to that next generation worker, it's going to take them years to pick that up. So the industry really has to get creative about how we try and find part-time opportunities for these older workers to stay engaged, act in a mentorship role. But again, it's not just all of them. It's finding the right ones, because there's nothing worse than putting a young person together with somebody who is an awful instructor. They're not going to learn anything. In fact, that might put them off the job altogether. So it's finding the right people, putting them together with young people to make sure that there's that transfer of knowledge, and also done in a way that it doesn't just become verbal diarrhea where here's 30 years of experience unloaded onto somebody in a very short period of time. It has to be structured in a way that that individual can absorb the information, take it in, experience it, so that they actually benefit from it, as opposed to just, well, I did my job. I told you everything I know. Now figure it out.
So that's a really, that's something that, the mentoring thing is so important, and I'm doing that with some of our older staff. Number one, you got to convince your older staff to delegate. The D word is a big one, because I can do it faster myself, and you got to say, no, yes you can, but no, you're not going to. Let these young people do it. Let them do it while you're there. Let them learn, okay? And I learned that lesson quite a few years ago, where I stopped giving my staff solutions and started encouraging them to come up with their own solutions, and I'm here. And I always say, I'm here if you need me, but go deal with it. And if you fumble the ball a bit, we'll figure it out. But mentoring is huge, and that's a huge part of what we can do as an industry, especially the older ones in the industry, is to encourage the young people to go do it. Because the sooner they do it, the more they're going to do it.
Just for productivity, I want your perspective on this. Cell phones. When I walk projects, there's the right level of communication that's required from the leaders and supervisors. But you see the general workers continuously on that. I know that's got to be controlled by each individual trade, but it'd be nice to have a rule, because we're also on a large project where, because it's a secret site, it's banned. So productivity, say, everyone's concerned that there's not going to be any type of communication about productivity. So I just wanted to get your guys' take on how that really has to be with unions and individual contractors. But if the overarching, if everyone has the same policies, what's your take on that? Because I feel it's a big disruption.
Okay.
I just identify problems.
So
He's the one who
interesting
fixes
enough,
them.
and maybe this might be the last question because we're running out of time, but at the union discussions, cell phones are always a topic about you can't force us to use our cell phones for business purposes, and you're not talking about that. You're talking about personal use, and you can make rules and you can tell people what to do, or you can try to educate them on why it's things. I think making a hard and fast rule to say no cell phones is only going to cause piles of resentment and go in the wrong direction. But if we can figure out how to educate and mentor young people, all people with their phones, to say, let's figure out how to use, do this so that we can keep productivity high and you can still get a chance to touch base from time to time. I understand what you're saying, but hard and fast rules, I was at Hillcrest High School in January, the teacher had one of those walls with little pockets on them, and she made her students stick the phones in there. I thought, good for you. I guess she did, but with adults, I don't know.
I guess if it's from the general contractor, or projects, we don't allow cell phones unless it's in leaders, say supers. I agree hard. If one subcontractor says no, another subcontractor says yes, and we're in a situation of labor force concerns, people would just leave one and say,
It is, and I more believe in creating incentives to educate them, to put them away and work and find the right time to do it, as opposed to making a hard and fast rule that they resent. And it's a tightrope, and I don't know how you walk it. You know, like I'd like to think we can mentor young people to go, I understand why I should work hard for this period of time, and when I'm on my break, I'll get on my phone and do it, right? Really difficult, yeah. I think we're good for time. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you coming in.